This is the Rugby Muscle Podcast, talking all that you need to become the best rugby player you can be. Now here are the Rugby Muscle coaches, TJ and Alex.
Yes! What's going on, boys and girls? TJ here, back again with another podcast. And we are joined, as always, by Alex. How's it going?
How's it going?
Alex Miller. And the reason I'm saying Alex Miller is because we're joined by another Alex on today's Rugby Muscle podcast. Alex, do I say Ferentino or Ferentinos?
Either. It's either's fine.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go with just Alex for now. Miller, you're reduced to being Miller for now.
Oh, okay.
It's like back at school, mate.
I think that's how we're going to work this. I don't know. Welcome, Alex. Welcome to the show. We've got some interesting insight to give you listeners from Alex in terms of nutrition, because Alex, I'll let you introduce yourself rather than give it a fact of the week. Alex, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why people should listen to what you say.
Oh, I'm terrible at doing these. It would have been better if you did it.
I know. I was going to big you up and everything as well.
No. Yeah, I'm trying to think how to describe what I do.
What does your Facebook page say you do?
I've got high performance nutrition and training on my website and everything like that. So I work to make scientifically accurate information on nutrition and training clear, simple, and effective. So with nutrition, I do that by making sure all the principles I use are physiologically sound, but then I make sure that all the food's delicious, it's a practical fit for people's lives, because there's much more to it than just adjusting for body weight, doing the same diet and adjusting for body weight for everyone. That the wheels fall off that wagon. And then with training, I'd just like to assess what people's goals are, how competent they are with training, and then draw up a program full of like real meat and potatoes, kill two birds with one stone type stuff. Like time effective workouts. So people under me, I at the moment I seem to be working with a lot in physique competitions again. I seem to go through phases of like more men, more women. Obviously, I think it must be the word of mouth element to it. Whoever you're working with attracts other people in that area. But for now, I keep working with a lot of physique competitor types, and they've done everything under the sun and stopped growing or can't improve a body part. They've come to me in one afternoon and we found out how to improve how they move, that sort of thing. And so I guess I'm quite good with making diets enjoyable and making training effective.
Nice. And you said you weren't very good at it.
Talk about, Alex, is one of the biggest reasons that I've been following you quite closely recently. Some of the little movement adjustments you're making on people's training are the quality. So a bit later on, we'll probably talk about that just for my benefit.
Yeah, that's nice to know. Thank you, mate. I stopped. I stopped. I mean, I started actually. I mean, I stopped holding the idea that I shouldn't share anything I do with clients. So I always used to treat it like I was some sort of doctor, and it was super confidential. But obviously, that doesn't do anything for business. And most people quite like it if you sing their praises from what they've done with you in training. So since I've started sharing all those little insights with various clients, I've had a lot of good feedback from the clients themselves, and then people from the outside viewing that they really enjoyed that. So it's nice to know.
Yes, you've been busy this year, mate. I've been seeing lots of social media presence for you and lots of commenting on various people's stuff. It's been good to see.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Which makes me sound like a weirdo that I'm following you around. But...
No, because I'm actively sharing it. So if I've shared it, it's obviously it's stuff that I want people to see, and you've seen it, so that's fine.
For sure.
Yeah.
You're both weirdos in my eyes anyway. It's all good.
Tell us about your rugby career, what you did, where you played, etc.
Just getting cut off.
I haven't played for years now, because basically with my anatomy knowledge, I've kind of worked out what I did to myself. But I think I did some partial labral tears, and obviously they really hurt. And then I kept playing, taking painkillers and caffeine, that sort of thing. And I think I got to the point where I made them full tears, because then my shoulders were just completely unstable. I'd put in a hit and either get a stinger or where your hands go numb. For people who don't know what that is, you get like pins and needles up and down your arm when you put in big hits, or I'll just be in a lot of pain. And obviously, if you get a stinger and your hands get pins and needles, you can't really pass a ball like that. So it doesn't really help a sport that's played with a ball in your hands. So I felt, so when I was doing that was through playing. I started playing rugby a bit more seriously when I was like 18, 19. I was a swimmer before that when I was a kid, and I was quite a handy swimmer. Like, I used to go to all these competitions, and I'd always be on the podium. Not to be arrogant, I was a good swimmer, but my school stopped me going and wouldn't let me out for the club I got scouted for. So that kind of went down the pan. I didn't really do anything at school. Like, I put a bit of a bad taste in my mouth at sport. I kind of played everything, but didn't really care. And then when I was an adult and left school, I started getting really into rugby for the social side of it mainly. And then I realised that if I actually worked hard under good coaches, that I could actually be fairly decent. So I put in a lot of effort and found and I say nearby, but it used to take me about an hour and a half to get to it, a National League club at Shelford. Yeah, that's it. So I just went training with them, and first year didn't get in. I was obviously nowhere good enough, like I wanted to be, but I wasn't. So, I ended up being there another 2 years, but the next year I got in the squad, and the year after that in the first squad. So that was quite good. But then I went off to uni in London, so that was obviously, things changed. And I ended up playing some rugby league down there with London Scholars. That was good fun. And
that was Champions, wasn't it?
Yeah, they're in North London. They're on White Hart Lane, but famous for being the home of Spurs. But I think their White Hart Lane, their stadium's just called that for tradition's sake. I don't think it's anywhere along there anymore.
Oh.
I could be wrong, but we never went past it going up and on the road, like in the cars or anything on the way there.
I tell you what, boys, that is.
Wow, that's an interesting fact.
We normally do a fact of the week, Alex, and for some, we just bypassed it in this episode. But there we go. We've actually done it. We've done it in the interview itself. So that's actually
okay. Well, the White Hart Lane thing.
Yeah, I'm impressed by that.
Around that, I played a lot of sevens as well, and I think we got a mutual friend in Chris Speed from doing all that. Chris, we
friend
played on the same thing.
Yeah, he's coming on next week, hopefully.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
I love watching his stuff because he's basically. I always enjoyed playing alongside him because he's pretty flair-tastic, isn't he? All his steps. Yeah. So yeah, I enjoy that. But it's nice to see him doing well in the because he's really passionate about all his strength work and Olympic lifting, and it's really cool to see him help others.
No, and he moves really well. Like he's got great control over his movements, and that's quite nice to see someone espousing that.
Yeah, and then he can get really advanced from that point as well, I find, because he's got such a great base.
Yes.
Like, he becomes really, really explosive and all of that. It's great. Right, so let's get into the meat of the podcast, so to speak. I mean, we are talking nutrition and all. And I wanted to try and pick your brains here a little bit, Alex, in terms of your nutrient. We all know that, calories in versus calories out. We've spoken about it a lot of times on the pod. That is going to dictate the majority of whether you're going to gain or lose weight, and then your training and the different certain macronutrient ratios, so your carbs, proteins, fats, that's going to dictate whether what you lose or gain is going to be muscle or fat. And we think that it's important that people are spouting that, but now what we've got on the complete opposite end of the spectrum is people that are now spouting that your macros are all that matters. So as long as you get carbs, protein, fat, that's the only thing that matters. And we think in terms of rugby players, actually, we need to train well. It's not a case of just burning X amount of calories. It's a case of moving well, performing really well, and then recovering from that. So do you have any strategies for rugby guys that are wanting to train hard and either we'll say for this example, let's say they're going to try and gain muscle. Do you have any sort of insight into what you do with your guys and your athletes? Because I know you've consulted with rugby players as well. In terms of
you
what
touched on some really good things there, because obviously the calories in, calories out is very relevant. The energy you're putting into your body from the food and your energy expenditure from exercise, obviously they're the most important thing. But sometimes the general public can get too wrapped up in things being high calorie for gaining weight or low calorie for losing weight in kind of a non-discriminate way. Whereas I'd rather people thought a bit more about their muscle, their performance, that sort of thing. So obviously total calories is the major thing, but within that, obviously we can look at the composition. How many grams of protein, carbs, and fats there are. I don't like to lock those into ratios. I'll say that as like tip one. You get a lot of people and they'll go, what's the perfect ratio? My diet's at like 33, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and they've got that pie chart they share of MyFitnessPal.
Yeah, and it's like, that's cool, but you could have that same pie chart in like 200 calories and 20,000.
Yeah.
Both are wrong. You know what I mean? So you've got to get the amounts right, but then, the total amount right. But then within that, obviously, the macronutrients, I'd say that they slide up and down independently based on your goals and needs. So that's what I would say. We look at it, we want to be mindful of the total intake, but also the three macronutrients that make up that total. It's important they're at the right levels and that we also that they're individually adjustable,
Yeah, for sure.
But timing also comes into it that you've mentioned, because there's some people now, they've got really blasé about certain things. They hear a fact and then they'll quote somebody like Alan Aragon, who has even been on a podcast last year to like make fun of people doing something like that. Well, that wasn't the whole topic of the podcast, but he touched on it. That'd be pretty silly if that was the entire topic. But when people, you get people who follow if it fits your macros, which is great. You hit targets, excellent. But you'll get some people who take it full retard and they'll just live on like sweets and whey protein and go, oh, I hit my protein and carbs. You're like, how on earth is that good for you if that's your entire approach?
Yeah, and I've seen like a lot of people with that argument, and it used to annoy me when I first like started really aggressively tracking like my carbs, protein, fat. It annoyed me because I didn't think there were people that just ate Pop-Tarts or ate shit and said it fits their macros, and because I didn't think those people exist. I thought people were smart enough to figure out that obviously you still need to eat some fucking fruits and vegetables, for God's sake.
Yeah, fruit would actually be the first carb I put in someone's diet generally, obviously, because it's going to promote more health benefits.
Yeah.
So I keep seeing all these people talking about, oh, if it's time for you to get serious about fat loss, make sure there's no fruit in your diet. And you think like, fuck, I missed that memo. I've had people turn up shredded for weigh-ins and like pretty much the only carb left in their diet was fruit at that point. You know what I mean? So there's nothing within fruit that like blocks anything like that. But, you see all sorts of either like mad extremes of people just eating garbage or trying to pin accruing body fat on particular foods. And I find both of those things quite sad to see. My approach, when you asked about what I do with rugby players and things like that, I actually like to find out, endeavour to fit in all their favourite foods if I can. I mean, for example, like I just built a diet before Christmas for a rugby player coming back from a hernia in the Premiership, and he mentioned one of his guilty pleasures, so to speak, was dairy milk bars with the Oreos in.
They're amazing.
So guess what the first thing that came out of his carb and fat allowance was in the day for him? Like that, not in terms of time of the day he consumed it. I just mean I made sure that fitted in and then built everything else up. And because he was allowed one of them every day, he wasn't going mad at the weekends because all his meals were nice and he had a few treats in a day. That doesn't work for everyone.
You're saying your first thing is adherence then. You structure it so there's adherence first.
Yeah.
And then essentially you just build it from calories to macros to timing to actual food composition.
Yeah, I did something really nerdy as well a few years ago. I had a spreadsheet made for me that just works everything out, which is quite cool. Because before I used to do it all with a calculator, and then you get it wrong and you have to do it again. You know that feeling. So I got it all done on a spreadsheet that just shows me all the wise intake ranges of protein, carbs, and fats for an individual, and then I can play around with their total calories as well. And then from there, I'll pick out the wise ranges, in grams per kilo. That's another thing I like to do. People will ask you how much, as if there's like a universal optimal amount, but it's going to depend on the person and how you dial it in for the person.
Are you saying that it's not just 300 grams of protein for everyone?
Yeah. Like if everyone on the planet ate 100, I think that would be perfect for all humans. Yeah. It would suit.
Alex, let me ask you a quick question on your amounts stuff.
Yeah.
When you say you either have someone losing, recomposition, or gaining.
Yeah.
When you're looking to gain, as most of our boys will be doing, do you set your calorie limit or your macro limit for the target weight, or do you set it for the current weight, or do you just have it on a sliding scale so they can work at it and increase it as they go?
Okay, I'm going to have to kill everyone that listens after this because I'll put myself out of business answering it. No, I'm joking. Terrible joke, never mind.
That's right. They're used to terrible jokes on this podcast, mate. Goodness sake.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, slip right in anyway. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I normally do is I'll plan like the absolute lowest that you could take carbs and fats without having people turn into zombies or be unhealthy. You know, because there's like a low threshold of fat intake.
So are we going to assume about 30 grams? Is that where you're at?
Yeah, around that mark, maybe a bit higher. And then carbs wise, I'd really loathe taking people below a gram per kilo. Really loathe it. So, and that's even worse if it's like a small woman and they only weigh 50, 60 kilos anyway. Because there's barely enough brain function. So, which some people don't grasp. You know, they don't realise that there's a lot of demands for carbs in the body before you even get to exercise. So what I like to do is work out the absolute like rock bottom, so to speak, if someone's cutting, and then I'll take them in steps towards that, but hopefully not have to go as far as that. And then with mass gain, I would just look to drive things up from sensible areas. So like if their fat is low, but they're trying to gain mass, maybe I might add in some more of that. If they're being mindful about carb intake to the point they're like scared to eat enough carbs, then I'll drive that up. But what I commonly see is people go super high protein when they're mass gaining. And then I often run into this opinion where people feel they don't need much protein when they're cutting because they're not building. But it's unfortunately that's just logic and not physiology. Yeah. So one tip I would give to people is that you have to appreciate that we've got two ongoing processes. So we've got muscle protein synthesis, where the body's going to build or repair, regenerate that muscle tissue, but also muscle protein breakdown, and they're going on at the same time. And if there's not enough protein there for that to be, repaired, then ultimately that's going to result in muscle tissue loss, let alone muscle tissue gain. Or
because if we're at a deficit, we know we're already losing weight, and if that muscle protein is already broken down, then that's the first to go.
And another thing, the rate of muscle protein breakdown in a cut increases. So you actually need a higher protein intake, which is contrary to logic. But as we know, in many situations, the body doesn't run on bodybuilder logic. It runs on, you've got to pay attention to biochemistry, physiology, things like that, and see how it actually works.
Yeah, for sure. I actually do that as well in terms of like... protein almost stays the same, except when you're beginning a cut, it will tend to go up, and then it's the carbs and fats that dictate whether you're going to gain or lose. And then a good way to do it is like, if you're trying to gain weight and you're not gaining weight, just keep gradually adding in until you are, and then if that gain stops, then keep adding more in and more in, and that's in terms of carbs and fat rather than protein.
I think that's a great idea. I actually describe protein to people as being like the non-negotiable centerpiece of all the feeds. Yeah. And then the carbs and fats being adjustable side dishes.
Yeah, perfect. And that way it's easier to set out when you plan it as well. Like, I always I don't really plan my carbs. I guess I plan my fats because I have them first. Like my high fat meals are usually in the morning, but I always plan my proteins. Like that'll be, if I'm meal prepping ahead of time, it'll be my proteins that I take care of first, and then the carbs I can get a bit more creative depending on if I've had a real tough session or whatever, a bunch of variables.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway, you spoke about like how the body works on physiology rather than logic, which is like such a great point. I actually have never looked at it that way, but it's true. Like it's like we get attached to these like romantic ideas that sound like they should work. It sounds like it makes sense, but when we look at the science, it doesn't. And another one of those is
carbs at night.
Yeah, this is what I was going to say. Actually, another one of those is again sort of to do with meal timing, but more just as much as meal frequency, where people say you've got to eat every 2 hours to stoke the metabolic fire. And I'm just going to say that's bullshit. But what are your thoughts on it? Because you're the expert.
Yeah, you've done the TLDR on what I want to say, basically.
Yeah.
So that's been tested and it's shown not to make a difference. But it's one of those things where most people who are into fitness for whatever reason, whether that's rugby or bodybuilding type pursuits, they're not necessarily into that because they're scientifically minded, you know. So if you are, you know, to clarify what that means, you know, you're not just going to take things, oh, my mate said, you know, that's not going to sway it for you. You want to see hard data and a wealth of it. And you also stay impartial and don't get emotionally attached to ideas so that as they evolve, you can move with the times. But a lot of people who don't get like that, they get emotionally attached to things they've done. Oh, well, that worked for me. And it's like, okay, sometimes you might get results in spite of something you're doing. And just because you did that at the same time, it doesn't mean it's optimal.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, guys listening to this are going to be in their prime as well, you know, like no matter what you do, like you're going to see something, as long as you're not doing something completely retarded. Can I just ask a question going from the other direction?
Sure.
Which means, so we're looking at this diet in terms of muscle protein synthesis versus muscle protein breakdown. Is there a window where if you're not absorbing amino acids or protein, whatever you want to define it as, that your protein synthesis is going to decrease below your protein breakdown? So you're actually going to be catabolic rather than anabolic in that situation.
Okay.
So rather than having 6 meals a day, what if you're having 1 meal a day? How does that affect it? Apart from obviously having to have one enormous meal.
Oh yeah, sorry, I tried to answer too early. Then I thought you finished the question. You didn't. Sorry, but no, that's that last bit's really good. That makes a lot of sense. So obviously, you've got that myth where people insert random figures anywhere from like 20 to 50 grams. They seem to say there's some like upper limit on how much protein you can have per meal. Quite simply, if you have some gigantic meal, it just takes longer to digest.
Like people say, it just disappears from your stomach, right? It just goes ridiculous.
Yeah, it just does some magic trick and goes to another universe or something from inside your body.
Where would it go?
Is pioneering that research, I think. But no, so from there, what you would look at is you probably want 4 to 5 feeds a day that are high protein, and that should really fix all of those issues. I think anything more than 4 to 5 is overkill. 3 may not be enough.
Anything more, this is a time restraint, right? I mean, how do you really find the time to prep and eat 6 meals a day? Right?
Yeah, it can be impractical and too much effort, but it's not going to yield any greater effect on muscle protein synthesis and what they call the attenuation of muscle protein breakdown, you know, so slowing that down, limiting that, offsetting it, so to speak. So, you're looking at 4 to 5 feeds centered around centered around an essential sort of protein source. But what I would further add to that is that you could make the last one of the day a slower releasing kind, like Greek yogurt, or some people use a casein protein supplement, you know, because milk is...
Would you also have that with a fat source as well to further slow it down?
Yeah, that's a great strategy. Yeah, Yep. If there's room, obviously, from what was consumed in the other 4 meals,
and depending on your training, obviously, etc., etc.
But
fiber's also a good strategy.
That'd be a great idea.
So what we can say is, for people who are thinking that intermittent fasting is a go-to for rugby, if you're looking to bulk, maybe it's not the best approach because your breakdown is going to be at some point greater than your synthesis.
Yeah, I just don't see how that can be a great strategy for anybody who's athletic, to be honest. And then when there are people that say, oh, so-and-so does it and they're quite good, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, they're good in spite of it. You know, like you could cycle to work on a bicycle with a flat tire, and then you go around going, I do it with a flat tire, everyone else should. Like, that's a fucking terrible idea.
Yeah, I like that.
But then, again, it goes back, I guess, to what you said before, where you set your adherence first. And some people, you know, for whatever reason, if they're traveling a lot or if whatever they're doing, they find that, you know, they can't get their first meal in until later on. And then Now there's a fucking name to it. It's called intermittent fasting. Before it was just called skipping breakfast, right? So
yeah, before it was called being the weak little excuse maker who skips breakfast.
Yeah.
Like, but I've had, before I aggravate half the internet by saying that, I've actually had clients who don't have any appetite and don't like to eat in the morning, but the happy medium's liquid nutrition there.
Yeah. I actually do that now at the minute. I've actually come from, because I used to do a bit of intermittent fasting just because I'd wake up a lot later in the day anyways, so it didn't really matter. And then I went from that to having a full breakfast because I was having a bulk, and I was like, well, I need to get the protein in. And it just became a hassle to me to make breakfast first thing in the morning, which, I mean, it's a shit excuse, but some people, I'd rather have that 10 minutes of extra sleep. So instead, I just made a shake, and it takes me 2 minutes. And now, if I don't have a shake, I feel like my mood's way off, and, even if I have a breakfast instead.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you get a lot of people who... they've got a big commute ahead of them. And, if you're like, okay, if you're honest, would you actually wake up to cook this? And they're like, nah. Okay, good. So now we've got a frank relationship, which is great.
Yeah.
So if they're like that, all right, well, I want you to put 2 scoops of this, some coffee granules, a couple of bananas in the blender, perhaps, some oats, maybe something like that, something along those lines.
And the coffee, is that for energy or as an appetite suppressant?
No, just some people need a bit of waking up, don't they? Or they
energy.
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend all those ingredients all the time. It depends on the situation.
Yeah, everyone's different, right? But
commonly
they've got
now
a
you
certain
get
amount of ingredients that they'll put in.
Yeah. Just based on the situation. But you commonly you also get a lot of the general public doing like boot camps and things like that now, and some of them try and go on an empty stomach. But I normally get people to have some whey or essential amino acids powder and some dextrose if they're not open to eating anything, or if they're waking up too close to the boot camp. And to be honest, if someone's going to hold a boot camp at 6 a.m., I'm not going to wake up at half, 4 maybe to cook and eat, have it digest either. So I'd much rather sort of roll out of bed to go there. And you can get around that by some liquid nutrition.
I actually had the exact same question come from one of my athletes last week. He was asking about it because he had to switch up his training schedule to 6 or 6:30 a.m. And he was basically saying, do I have to eat something before? And I said, well, how's your energy levels when you're working out? He's like, it's fine. Keep doing it. I was like, well, how would your energy levels be if you woke up at 4:30 a.m. and then had some breakfast before? He was, well, I'd probably be more tired. Well, there's your answer. It's not. You don't have to get everything in the perfect world. It's just what works for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
for sure.
Sweet. So let's finish up on the food stuff now. And Alex, can you just give us essentially a quick summary of what we've said? We've gone over a lot.
What about if we come up with one each from what we've discussed?
Yeah.
And then so mine would be find a routine that works for you and consistently week to week is getting you progress. If you look at your progress over maybe a month or 2 months and you haven't got anywhere, maybe something needs to change. But if you're getting towards your goals week by week by week, you're probably doing something right, and there's no need to make too much change because it's the routine that is easier to stick to. With the internet, we've got so much information out there. You keep second guessing yourself, but that actually is going to cause you more damage than good. So just keep sticking with your routine, keep making progress, and ensure that you are making that progress.
Yeah, I think with that one, Tom, I strongly agree. But I'd say before people do that, make sure that routine is from somebody quality at what they do.
Yeah.
But also be open to refining it. Just because you did something before, doesn't mean that was optimal, or you should be defensive about the methods or emotionally attached to any of them. Sometimes the needs are going to change and evolve, and sometimes we get new information that helps us better do our job as coaches. And for example, there are things I did 3 or 4 years ago that I wouldn't do with people now.
For sure.
I think that's really good advice.
I agree, but I would also think that people that are stuck in their ways actually don't make anywhere near as much progress as they think they're making. So if you're looking at your results objectively, you're probably not getting as you're not getting as good of results as possible. So therefore, I think that's when you need to adjust. As long as you're making clear, consistent progress, make little alterations, but don't change the whole thing. Whereas people that don't make results will still think that their thing works in spite of the fact they haven't got any results. And if you actually objectively look at your results, you'll know whether what you're doing is shit or not.
I'll just jump in and say that the protein at every meal, as you spoke about, is a huge deal, and everything else built around that.
Simple.
Yeah, I think that's quite important for sure, because if you're doing that, you're looking after your machinery basically for being an athlete. All of that comes from the neuromuscular system, doesn't it, really? So if you're not looking after the muscle, you're not really going to be able to express power and speed optimally, are you? So on that front, it is quite important. But carbs also play a role in that too. It's shown that taking on carbs during training improves performance and can also be protective of muscle. So but I think I probably touched upon that already by saying I really loathe pulling anyone below 1 gram per kilo on carbs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sweet. Right, boys. You can catch Alex Ferentinos on all. Are you on everything? You're on Insta, Facebook, Twitter.
I started Instagram begrudgingly. I thought it was just all food pics and ab selfies for narcissists and nauseous.
That's all right now, isn't it?
I really didn't want to join it for a long time, and then I realised that no one uses anything else anymore. Everyone uses Instagram, and it is what you make it. So now I just put out training and info and ideas on cookery and stuff, and do what I want. Whether it gets popular or not, I don't know. But Instagram, Twitter, those Facebook likey page things, whatever you call them nowadays. But they're pretty much all Alex Ferentino 7.
Yeah, and if you're in the UK, look out. He runs seminars at all gyms, so be on the lookout for that and you get a weekend or just a day of getting some great advice that you can actually use in your training and your nutrition.
Yeah, that's a good one. Good reminder, actually, Tom. I've got one coming up in Northern Ireland, the end of March, and Edinburgh. I've got 8 UK locations they're going on in, but the first 2 are making serious efforts to make them actually happen in the early part of the year now.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, boys, we'll check you later.
Yeah, thank you, guys.